special guest, Taylor Haynes, who is in town right now, who is running for governor of the state of Wyoming. And you and I haven't actually, when's the last time we saw it? The Common Core thing, which was a few months ago. Last time. Yeah, right. Last time we saw each other. Okay. And you announced, was that when you announced that you were going to be running for governor, or did you announce before then?
Well, I announced an exploratory campaign in May. Okay. And we've been kind of traveling the state to see if there was enough support, and clearly there was. And so February 1st, we made it official that we're going to run.
All right. So this is the time when I get a chance to ask you all the questions that everybody's been asking me to ask you. So for those people in the state of Wyoming, if you have any questions for a candidate who's running for governor, 307-363-4093 is the phone number, and I'll be reminding you of that throughout the program. So we're gonna start with some background here.
Sure.
Born where?
Born in Shreveport, on a produce farm near Shreveport, Louisiana.
On a produce farm?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Well, I was born in a hospital, but...
Well, I was about to say, like, not under the produce table or anything like that, but in a hospital.
No, I actually had a physician.
Yeah, okay. Now, from there, you wound up in Wyoming how?
Well, I got Bachelor of Science Mechanical Engineering in Baton Rouge at Southern University, and I was recruited to Salt Lake City by Kennecott.
Right.
And I worked there for about 6 years and then decided to go to med school so I could be a little more autonomous as a physician. And then I was recruited to Cheyenne by the medical community, which is how I wound up in Wyoming.
What kind of physician were you?
Urologist.
Urologist, okay.
I was board certified in adult and pediatric urology. Did the first neonatal surgery done in Wyoming.
Practiced for how long?
14 years in private practice, and then I helped out at the VA to get them caught up with their specialty for another 3 years, so 17 years altogether.
Okay. Have you done any other lines of work besides that?
A few. Yeah. To pay for my engineering degree, I was a teamster, worked on a freight dock, had a CDL, so we drive vacation routes, and I also would work on the waterfront in Houston, the Houston Ship Channel during holidays, because you could make 3-4 times as much. And so between a stevedore and a teamster, it was very comfortable to pay for college.
Right.
And my boyhood love actually was ranching. Even though I was on a produce farm, I was born a cowboy. So moving to Wyoming and the opportunity to buy a ranch was just irresistible.
Well, there's the next thing. What caused you to leave those professions and decide to get into ranching? I mean, if you're a doctor, that's a pretty lucrative profession, or was at one time anyway. So
was at one time, and it was a real privilege, and it was, practicing surgery was wonderful, was just wonderful. But my late wife was dying of breast cancer. She was also the office manager.
Right.
And so I closed the practice to be home at the ranch with Barb during her last days. I was able to take care of all of her needs being a physician, and so she could maintain her dignity because it was her husband providing the care. After her passing, it's like, if you're ever going to ranch, now's the time. And it also gave you time to do your grieving in private.
Right. I understand that.
And so I never went back after that.
Okay. Now, any experience in politics at all? I mean, as a politician, I mean.
Well, except for my run in 2010, no.
Okay.
And I've never been elected to an office, so I haven't actually sat in a chair. I did do 12 years as a trustee on the Board of Trustees for the University of Wyoming, and I was vice president of the board before I left, and I was also chairman of Fiscal and Legal Affairs.
Okay, so that's where I was going next. You have been active in politics, but behind the scenes and not as a politician.
Behind the scenes. I guess on the board, you're more of a bureaucrat.
Right. Okay, now, what caused you to run for governor first time? Because that's when I moved to the state of Wyoming, and I remember that all of a sudden you entered the race and were touring the state, and you tried to get on the ballot, but the best you could do is as a write-in candidate. And for that matter, I'm trying to remember what percentage did you pull as a write-in candidate. It wasn't bad.
7.5% of the vote. We campaigned. We started campaigning after the primary, which was the first or second week in August, and we started really campaigning hard after that, and we got 7.5% of the vote. It was the message. What prompted me to run was the message that did so well. It's federal overreach, loss of respect for the Constitution, loss of knowledge of the Constitution in our citizenry and in our elected officials. I'm not saying our elected officials are bad. I'm saying they don't know the Constitution. And they take an oath to uphold and defend it, and then a lot of their actions violate the Constitution without their knowledge. And unless you take them to court which you really shouldn't have to do. They don't realize that they've made a mistake. So to restore our constitutional rights and to, as a leader, turn our people back to God, because our rights come from God. They don't come from man, they come from God. And we form governments and write constitutions to protect your God-given rights. That's kind of the big picture. But more of a detail and closer to home, the federal government through its agencies, the EPA in particular at this point in Wyoming, and Health and Human Services with Obamacare, but the EPA first is destroying Wyoming, destroying our economy, and destroying our sovereignty, and they have no authority to act in our state, but yet they're being allowed to do that. So it's those things. And it was the wolf issue. It was all of those issues, and even back to the Clinton administration with change on the range, trying to force ranchers off public land, which is the heart and soul of our ranching communities. Those things have pushed me to be governor, because as governor, I can defend our people, because as governor, I still have the 10th Amendment, and I have the entire Constitution to hold the federal government to task, to respect their constitutional authority, but have them respect our constitutional authority as well.
I'm talking with Taylor Haynes, who's running for governor for the state of Wyoming second time around, which means you're going to be running on a Republican ticket this time?
Republican. I ran as an independent before because I missed the primary.
Okay. So if you're running this time around, I guess that means that you have a problem with Matt Mead sitting in the office of governor.
I have a problem with his administration, with the way he's administered the state. I don't see that Governor Mead has represented us at all. I see that he has acted instead like a federal administrator. He has gone along with every executive order or rule that they've come down the road with. So they floated a trial balloon. They took more mineral money, which rightfully 100% belongs to the state. And he wrote them a strong letter. The EPA changes our state's boundaries, trashes the private property rights of people in Fremont County, notably Riverton, and he writes them a strong letter, and he stamps his feet. Well, the governor should be able at the conference table put all of these entities into their constitutional pigeonholes without rancor and without going to court. And I know that can be done. I've had some success in backing the federal government out of Wyoming simply as a rancher by enforcing the Constitution and holding it to their nose and holding their line of authority to their nose, and they've gone quietly. You didn't read about it in the newspaper,
right?
Because they don't want people to know they're bluffing.
Okay, so how would you, for example, handle the EPA in the state of Wyoming as governor? And I know that you have talked about some things, this may be outside of the EPA, but nullification. How would you handle that? Would nullification be part of it?
Well, it would work just like nullification, but since they're not an elected body and they can't make law, you don't need nullification. They're a federal agency with no jurisdiction in any sovereign state, which we are still one. I would exercise at least 2 of the Supreme Court decisions that have already come down. In Mack Prince, Justice Scalia, writing for the majority, said the EPA, and he named them specifically, has no authority to act in any state. And in New York versus the United States, again, Justice Scalia, writing for the majority, pointed out that the United States Congress has no authority to make rules outside of Article 1, Section 8 for any of the states.
Right.
So knowing that they have no authority, you simply tell them take a hike. If they try anything, then whichever county they tried in, they're introduced to the county sheriff.
Okay, but what if the EPA doesn't, since they can't respond, that instead, let's say the current administration, whoever's in office at the time, because it's not going to be just, it wouldn't just be the Obama administration, another administration would be elected, whoever's there, yeah. So that would mean that they would try to take other kind of action against the state of Wyoming. I mean, it would be more than just the EPA coming after you. So what then?
Well, Wyoming is in a unique position to be self-sufficient, but we're also in a unique position to call into our services, if you will, our customer base.
Yeah.
Since we provide 20 to 25% of the power for the United States of America, that gives us a tremendous amount of political clout. And with the way they're shutting coal-fired power plants around the country down, I will work very rapidly to get us to at least 30%, and my goal is 60%. Because we have the coal resources to do that, we will be eventually producing 60% of the nation's power. So what are you going to do about us?
Well, now, what happens when not just the EPA, but the BLM, the Interior Department, come along and say, but this is federal land that this energy is on?
They're done. It is not federal land. Based on Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, they can own 10 square miles of Washington, D.C., and they're sovereign in the territories. And that's it. They're land managers. And they will be done along with the EPA, on Inauguration Day 2015 if Taylor Haynes is your governor.
Okay, but we can't just, let's say, would you issue an order, or would you have to go through the state legislature?
No, I can do it through the legislature, but I don't have to because it's already law. And the governor's job is to faithfully enforce the statutes. And the Constitution for the United States is the grand law of the land. Now, if the legislature wants to come along, and there's a lot of talk, and they've looked at some bills, and if I'm the governor in transition, I will work with them to get that legislation right if they want to pass it. But I will send the regional managers for those agencies a cease and desist letter.
Okay, but then we wind up in court and eventually the Supreme Court. We don't.
No. Supreme Court actually doesn't have jurisdiction to hear that case because they're an arm of the federal government and have a built-in conflict of interest. And it's already been decided in the writing of the Constitution and in several other Supreme Court decisions already determined that we have that jurisdiction.
But they will file those lawsuits, though.
Oh, I don't have any way to stop them from filing a lawsuit. They don't have any way to make me show up in court.
Okay. Let's head over to the phones real quick. This is Glenn. Who's on the phone?
Hi. Actually, I'm just trying to figure out what channel I can listen to you on.
Where are you at?
In Gillette.
Try 103.1. If you can't get on that channel, go to my website, which is boldrepublic.com, and you can listen right off the webpage.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. By the way, if you have any questions for Taylor, because I tend to run my mouth off and not announce the phone number enough, 307-363-4093. That's 363-4093 is the phone number. So, okay, they tried to take you to the Supreme Court, and your answer is, I don't have to show up in court.
That's right. They don't have jurisdiction to hear the case. The United States government does not have standing to file a suit because they don't have title to the property.
Right.
Now, if the people want a little more documentation, I would refer them to a Supreme Court decision called Hagan versus Pollard. And that's the case where the Supreme Court again said the federal government has no jurisdiction over any property in any sovereign state, except as outlined in Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution.
Okay, what about all of the federal land that they will try to claim to in the state of Wyoming? Because they do say that a lot of that land is, frankly, theirs.
It's not there.
It's just not. You're just going to say that it's not. This is like in effect, eminent domain. But
I will send them a letter.
Yeah.
It's like they've been driving a stolen car.
Right.
And now I found my car.
Yeah.
They're out of luck.
Okay. So next you're going to have to deal with the Wyoming legislators, because as much as I would like to say they're going to be on your side on this, Taylor, they're not going to be on your side on this.
Then they'll be irrelevant and immaterial because they don't have any authority to do anything outside the law.
Right.
And they would have to pass, in order to cede that property to the federal government, they actually would have to pass a constitutional amendment. Then it'd have to be voted on by the people. Then it's got to go to the U.S. Congress, and they have to pass it as a constitutional amendment. Then it's got to be ratified by three-fourths of the states.
That means that the next Wyoming legislative session, which would be 2015, is going to be one interesting session because a lot like with SF 104, they're going to try to rein you in.
Well, they will have to, and it's not that I can't be reined in.
Right.
You got to do it with the Constitution.
Okay.
Or take a hike.
Right.
And so rather than wait for the legislature to impanel, I will work with them in transition with the leadership. I will put on a constitutional class not taught by myself. So if you can't be a prophet in your own home ground.
Right.
I will put on a constitutional class. I'll invite Constitution scholars from around the country, and I will also invite Sheriff Mack, who has walked this walk and won at the Supreme Court, to outline and then specifically define for them the authority they have under the Constitution, which is the main thing they don't understand, but also the penalties for not honoring their oath to uphold and defend the Constitution.
This is Glenn, who's on the phone.
Hey, Glenn, it's Levon.
Yes, sir. What you got?
Oh, I had a quick question. Isn't Utah doing the same thing, basically, where they're trying to take back some of their state land?
They are trying the same idea, but they're taking a different approach. Their governor's not leading the charge. And there are legislators in our legislature who want to do this as well, and I think working with them is what I plan to do, but I have to do it no matter what, because you see, once I raise my hand and take the oath, I mean to uphold it and defend it.
Awesome. That's what I need to hear. Thank you.
Back in with Taylor Haynes. If you have any questions for him, by the way, 307-363-4093 is the phone number. I'll do that nice and slow for him. 363-4093 is the phone number. Dr. Taylor Haynes is running for governor again of the state of Wyoming. I still think, though, and I hope I'm wrong, the Wyoming Supreme Court and the legislators, because I tell you, Taylor, I just about hit the floor laughing. Someone did a survey and found that most of the legislative body, House and Senate, we have one of the most Republican conservative bodies in the entire United States. And I thought to myself, but a good number of those representatives are Democrats who couldn't get elected in Wyoming as a Democrat and just put an R by their name. So you're actually dealing with a pretty big Democratic body as House and Senate.
Sure, and that's the reason that we have a written constitution.
Mm.
And once it's already in the statute, and once it's already been upheld by the Supreme Court, I don't need them. And that's where we are with these issues. The ownership of the land, once you leave territorial status and become a state, you own every square inch within your borders, period.
Right. Now, you're going to be accused of, I don't think this is true, but this is what you're going to be accused of. So right now we have a president who's trying to do everything by executive order.
Right.
And that's what they're going to come after you for.
I'm not going to make an executive order.
Okay.
The law has already been written. See, my job is to enforce the laws, not to make them up.
Right.
Obama's making them up. I'm going to enforce the Constitution, and I'm going to live by the Supreme Court decisions that have already gone down in this arena. Now, the legislature, I suspect, will come along once they go through the Constitution class, and once we go through all the things that have been done in this arena and it's not acted on by many of the Western states. And so there's already legislators who understand that we need to do this. Now, they're not necessarily the majority yet, but when I ran in 2010, there were very few who understood even what I was talking about. So they've done quite a bit of study. So I'm optimistic about the legislature, but it's not about my abilities to get anybody to do anything. It's my ability to read the Constitution and read the law that's already been laid down.
Do you think that many of them will even show up for I'm a cynic about this, will show up for the Constitution class?
It will. The people that will be invited, and it's an invitation. It's not a coercion. It will be the leadership, the secretary, the president of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House, and any other leadership people that we have at the time, chairman of committees will all get a formal invitation. The president of each county commission and the elected sheriff in each county will all be invited. And the whole point of that is not to make anybody do anything, but it's a chance for them to learn the Constitution as it applies to the job and the oath they've taken. Now, if they don't know the law, that's not my problem. And there's also Supreme Court decisions and case law that says ignorance of the law is no excuse. Now, understand, if you take the oath to uphold and defend the Constitution and you violate that, you are culpable under U.S. Title 18 statutes, which actually you can be prosecuted and jailed, fined, or jailed. So it's not like I've got an empty threat, and it's not a threat at all. It's like if you are doing 80 in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, you're going to be fined.
Right. And
so that's not a threat. That's a fact of the life and as a consequence of law. And so that's all I'm saying. I will enforce the law.
Okay. But much like, and here's me still being cynical about it, but much like the whole Cindy Hill issue that we've been going through, it sounds to me like you're going to have a pretty good attorney in your office while you're going through all
I'm going to have a great attorney general.
Yeah.
I'm going to have an attorney general who is as passionate about the Constitution as I am, dedicated, and therefore has studied and practiced it for many years like I have. Not quick study, Johnny-come-lately political appointment. It's going to be a person who is not only at least as steeped in the Constitution as I am, but also an attorney then, therefore, who understands proceedings. So, and I will need that. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time and money in court fighting over decisions that have already been decided in court.
Let me break away real quick for those people listening on radio stations. Your affiliate stations are about to break away for a commercial break. For those listening on the internet, we'll continue. Hold in there. For those who are continuing to listen on the internet, my name is Glenn Woods. I'm talking with Dr. Taylor Haynes, who is running for governor of the state of Wyoming. So, okay, you're going to find an attorney. You're going to need it. I mean, come on, let's face it, Taylor. You're going to need an attorney for all of what you're talking about.
And that's your attorney general.
Okay, where do you find this guy?
Or gal.
Gal, okay.
Or whomever. I've been studying possible candidates since before my run in 2010. And so I know at least 2 very, very strong people.
Okay, and willing?
Willing.
Okay.
Willing. Oh, yeah, willing. We've had the conversations.
Okay.
And I haven't made the decision entirely, but I know 2 who not only know the Constitution, but have tried their very best to live by it, and are passionate in their own right, separate from me, and really have never worked with me in any capacity. So I think I'm very solid there for a good attorney.
Okay. Now, the next, it's not just going to be, I believe, lawsuits that would come from within the legislature, but from outside of, because you remember, as even they tried a few simple little cuts in the state of Wyoming over the past couple of years, there were groups who wanted to sue over that.
Sure.
So there's going to be outside groups within the state of Wyoming that are going to come after you.
So we will evaluate every suit.
Okay.
And if they don't have standing to bring the suit, we will just ignore it.
Okay.
If the court doesn't have standing to hear it, a lot of people run to federal court, and the federal court does not have standing to hear the suit. Once you enter the court, you've abdicated your constitutional rights, and now you are under their purview.
Yeah.
And so we are. This isn't our first rodeo, so to speak. So there'll be more rancor in the media.
Right.
And so what? My job is to do the right thing and calmly evaluate every situation and then make the right decision, along with my counsel and my cabinet and maybe the other 4 top elected state officials, depending on what the suit is. So we may go to court if they have standing, and if the court they file a suit in has standing to hear the case.
Right.
So, and most of the time when I see that these days, either the people that have brought the suit don't have standing to bring it, or the court doesn't have standing to hear it. But it happens anyway. Well, that's not going to happen to Wyoming under my watch.
Okay. So I guess there's some justices out there that if you're elected are just going to have to get used to the idea that they're going to have a lot of business coming their way. And you're prepared for that, right? You just understand that that's going to happen.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. But it's going to be under the Constitution. So it might not be as much business as they're anticipating.
Right. Okay. And I've just got to take a moment here for the affiliate stations to rejoin us. So for those people watching on the internet, hold on just a moment. Back in we dive with Dr. Taylor Haynes, and already you have a phone call on the line. This is Glenn, who's on the phone.
Hey, Glenn, it's John.
Yes, sir.
I was curious to ask Dr. Haynes, and I'll take my answer off the air, what he thinks about how the state government is keeping its fiscal house in order these days and what he would do differently.
That's a good question. Go ahead.
That's an excellent question, and I'm very concerned about our fiscal house. We're spending more money than we're actually taking in, and we're drawing on our reserves, and the people don't know that. So one of the things I plan to do when I take office, I plan to make our government make sense. I plan to have us live within a budget. Once I get budgets from my state agencies and we agree on that and I take them to the legislature, we're going to live within that budget. And we're not going to draw funds from unknown places to do things with. We're going to live within the budget, and that's going to be transparent. The budget is a little complicated, but I think most of the people in Wyoming, if you present the budget, they'll understand it. And I plan to do that. I plan to do it in 2 ways. 1, it'll be up on the web in a readable fashion. And 2, when I do town hall meetings as governor, which I certainly plan to do, people can ask any question they choose, even though I will have a couple things that I'll advertise I'm coming to talk about. The town hall meeting and won't be limited to that.
By the way, if you have any questions for Dr. Taylor Haynes, his phone number is 307-363-4093. He is running for governor in the state of Wyoming. So let's talk about that budget for a minute here. Wyoming budget, I was just watching Wyoming Liberty Group, and of course I've had people like Maureen Bader and others such who have been going through the budget.
Right.
And we were told this was supposed to be a neutral year, but they've shown that we're going to have about a 7% increase, it seems like. So the state of Wyoming seems to be growing every single year and looking for more revenue every single year. And let's get back to the feds again. A lot of that money is coming from outside of the state, from the feds.
From the feds, but it's our money that they take out of our minerals, and then they send it back to us.
Yeah.
Or they take our tax money and they send it back to us. There's a two-pronged approach there. The first prong, when we take over all of our lands and we collect 100% of our federal mineral, what's now federal mineral royalties, they are Wyoming mineral royalties. When we collect that, we've immediately got an increase in income. But again, during transition, before that happens, I want additional legislation to determine where those income streams go. I don't want all of that going into the permanent mineral trust or a rainy day fund, which seems to never figure out when it's raining. So I want a formula to fund our cities, counties, and towns based on their road and bridge, their buildings, their capital investment, plus their salaries and pensions, etc. How do we contribute to that to keep the tax burden low in the counties, cities, and towns? And the other thing I want to do, and I know we can do it, is I want to start, first of all, by leaving at least 50% more of the sales tax money in the communities. And I want to rapidly, over the next 3 years of my administration, by the time my first 4 years are up, I want to leave 100% of the sales tax in the communities. And here's the reason why. Sales tax is collected in the community. It's voted on by people in their individual communities. I don't understand why any of it goes to Cheyenne. It just makes no sense. So by doing that, then we're going to be changing some things at the state level. But we've got enough mineral royalty money to run on, and we shouldn't have enough fuel tax money to repair our roads. If not, then we can cross over from some other state fund. Raising taxes is not ever the answer to a revenue problem.
What about those that would make the argument, well, if you have a bigger community like Cheyenne, or like this one, where there's quite a bit of sales tax revenue, but then you have a small community where, let's face it, they're lucky to even have a few convenience stores there. Should some of the money from here be diverted over to those towns through sales tax?
Not through sales tax.
Okay.
Sales tax is collected, and it should be voted on and spent where it's collected and voted on. Now, in the smaller communities, remember, I'm calculating also their road, bridge, and all of their infrastructure expenditures as well. They may get a different percentage from the mineral money that we're now taking in to help them with their infrastructure.
Right.
And so sales tax might be irrelevant in the community that is so small, but they still have a certain amount of public infrastructure, and I think that should come from the mineral wealth, not from sales tax from another community.
Okay. What about when the federal government dangles something in front of the state of Wyoming like, oh, hey, Medicaid expansion's a great idea. Here's a few $100 million. And that is tempting to some of the legislators. What would you do?
But not to this governor, because, one, it's very poor leadership to sit around and wait on someone to come in and help you with a problem that you have in your community.
Right.
Because of Obamacare, if anything positive from Obamacare has come out of that for my wife and I, we run a third-party administrator for you listeners. We design and manage health plans for companies that self-fund and partially self-fund. So we study health care and benefits in great detail. We are working on, and I'm working with a few doctors around the state, a plan that will eventually cover everybody, and the state will back out of it. It'll be privately run, privately funded by the patients, physicians, and the facilities that take care of patients, so that everybody will be covered, and the system will be not only self-sustaining, you can pay physicians well enough to attract top-quality physicians, but the patients aren't being dragged through the mud and dragged through a knothole to pay their medical bills. That's not an easy thing to do, but we just about have a system for Wyoming worked out. The piece that's missing, so I haven't brought it out for prime time, through our national PPO networks, we need to work out a way so when Wyoming people travel, they're covered under their system. And it'll be a combination of a subscription system so that they're paying a flat rate every month to a given medical group and facility. But then when they travel, that also needs to cover them if they get hurt on the road. And that piece we don't have in place yet, but we're working on it.
You would need reciprocities with other states if you're talking about traveling across state lines.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
By the way, if you have any questions for this candidate for governor for the state of Wyoming, 307-363-4093 is the phone number. That's 363-4093. So when you ran first time, again, you wound up becoming a write-in candidate just because it was at a late date, really was the reason why, from where I was sitting. And so I had then candidate Matt Mead on, and I had to ask him the questions. So because he had mentioned you. So what do you think about Taylor Haynes? And there was this long pause, and he said, why would I really care what a Democrat thinks in Wyoming? And I'm paraphrasing here, but he looked at you and said, well, the guy has a background. He's a Democrat. Well, Taylor, have you ever been a Democrat? Are you now? Or?
I have been a Democrat. I was raised by two Southern Baptist Democrats in the Bible Belt. And so if that's not a conservative credential, there isn't one.
So you're a Dixiecrat, in other words.
Dixiecrat. Yeah. And I saw the light as the party began to change away from what it should have been.
Right.
And I saw the same light that Ronald Reagan saw. And because Ronald Reagan was also a Democrat and in his earlier years. And it's more like Winston Churchill said, if you're not a liberal when you're 25, you have no heart.
Right.
And if you're not a conservative by the time you're 40, you got no brains.
Okay. Let me hop right on to the phones real quick. This is Glenn. Who's on the phone?
This is Boone.
Yes, what you got for me?
Well, Boone, listen, Glenn, first I want to compliment you on what you're doing and the service you provide.
Thank you.
Here with your radio station. I'd like to comment first and foremost and say that your reactions to what Dr. Haynes is saying tend to be typical of people who have learned to fear the power of the federal government. And you're sitting in front of a man who understands the limitations that were provided by the Constitution, who doesn't have that fear.
Well, actually, let me correct you on one personal note there. It's not my fear of the federal government or learn to. My job here, and I've known Taylor since he first decided to run, is to challenge him and make him answer what are the questions and the problems that he's going to face. So it's not a matter of what I believe. There's times that I'm asking questions where I know full well what the answers are, but you need to hear Taylor say it. That's why I'm challenging the way I am.
Well, bravo, Glenn, and good on you, and bless Taylor Haynes. He's definitely a man for the job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And by the way, I do get that a lot. But in most cases, I already know what you're going to say, but I have to ask that question.
Sure, because the listeners need to know what I'm going to say.
Right.
They need to know that if they could pick up a tape from the 2010, the answers haven't changed.
Right. Well, now let's take something. He does make a point, though. There are those people out there who do have a fear of the federal government.
Right.
And when you get out there and speak to them, they'll agree with you, but they're going to be afraid of the consequences, Taylor. They might be hesitant to vote for you for that very reason.
And we have to overcome that. Right. And that's why I always quote at least one or two Supreme Court decisions, because people have been trained to look for that. And that's not necessarily inappropriate, but it lets them know that I'm not planning any kind of revolution or armed insurrection. I plan to just enforce the law as already written and as already decided in case law. They don't know that because it's not taught in school. And the federal government and the federal land managers certainly aren't going to teach them.
This is Glenn. Who's on the phone?
Hi, Glenn. This is John.
Yes, sir.
Taylor, with all this stuff that's been going on with Mrs. Hill, I'd like to have your take on it. And what do you think is going to be with her jumping into the governor race? How it's going to affect your run for the governor?
That's a very good question. Thanks for calling in.
Well, thank you. Excellent question. First of all, when Senate File 104 was still in committee, several of us, at least 20 that I can think of, actually testified against that in person. And I specifically was very precise with my testimony, calling that unconstitutional on its face, and warned the legislators about that. Now,
well, let's hold on because I had to interrupt you, but we got one of those mandatory breaks coming up. So more with Taylor Haynes in just a
I will answer that after the break.
And for those people that are still watching on the internet right now, Taylor and I are going to continue while we break away for 3 minutes for the affiliate stations to play their commercials. So, okay, in part, that is, you said softball question as we were going with the whole Cindy Hill issue. Why is that a softball question?
Well, I stand firmly on the Constitution, and I carried, as many of you know, petitions, and I also lobbied around the state for people to sign the petitions to put that referendum on the ballot in case the Supreme Court disagreed with us. But they agreed. Now that the Supreme Court has struck down 104, no matter what you hear the governor say, no part of 104 can be constitutional. It's all struck down. And now in our system of government, it's remanded then to the district court to issue the remedies. They're going to have a hearing on the 18th. In other words, the Supreme Court does not issue remedies. They speak on constitutionality. And now they've spoken, and the Senate File 104 is struck down. Cindy Hill is the lawful superintendent of public instruction. And I would expect, now I don't run the district court, but I would expect the district court then to issue something on the order of a cease and desist to the appointed director of public instruction and to the legislature and to everything that flowed from Senate File 104. It should be washed away. Yeah, a lot of money down the drain. They made a mistake. Okay, fine. But now we're not going to make another mistake. And then Cindy Hill should be in her office running the State Department of Education with all of its constitutional authority. Now, and the second question was, how does it affect my campaign having her in the governor's race?
Right.
Well, good competition makes you sharp.
Yeah.
And what I want the people to do is to not be lazy. I want you to look at the body of work throughout our professional careers.
Paul's right there while I rejoin with those affiliate stations, and I'm going to ask that question again for everybody else.
Sure.
Back in we go, the last 7 minutes of the program. So Taylor, we have to answer the question again. So one of your opponents, and you will have to debate with her, talk with her, is Cindy Hill. Your opinion on Cindy Hill and
what happened to her?
What happened to her? Yeah.
Well, again, when Senate File 104 was in committee, I know at least 20 of us testified against it, and my testimony was direct and precise to the point that that was unconstitutional. That's been upheld by the Supreme Court, so that the Supreme Court has struck down Senate File 104. So no part of that is constitutional, and nothing that flowed from that is constitutional. So I would fully expect now in our system of government, it's remanded to the district court to issue the remedies. And so I would expect them to issue a cease and desist to the appointed superintendent of public instruction, and he should vacate the office. And everything that flows from that. And Ms. Hill is the lawful superintendent of public instruction and should be in her office with all of its constitutionally mandated authority. Now, as far as how her being in the governor's race affects me, you mentioned the debate, and I think debates are great because the people get to see the difference in the candidates. And I want the people to not be lazy. I want you to look at the body of work. As professionals, my body of work mostly in the private sector, her body of work mostly as an educator and a teacher, and then you have to decide between us and Matt Meads body of work as governor. I mean, you have 3 candidates in the race, gives you competition so that every point of view should be brought out now.
Right.
And candidates should be placed in uncomfortable situations, except I'm never uncomfortable.
Right.
Situations so that
I'm trying, but it's not working well.
So that candidates answer questions directly and under fire, and if the candidate doesn't answer your question, restate the question again. So I'm not bothered at all by Ms. Hill being in the race for governor, but I will say this. To her credit, no one has advanced the ball for the cause of education as far as she has. And my concern is if she herself is not the superintendent of public instruction, will anyone coming after her have the courage or whatever it takes to continue to advance the ball? I would love to have her in that spot with me at her back as governor, and we will get this whole thing done. But that's her decision.
Right. Okay. So on that same education issue, Common Core in the state of Wyoming.
Common Core will be the death knell for education, not only in Wyoming, but in the country. So when I'm governor of Wyoming, Common Core is done. I want to reintroduce the flexibility for our teachers to teach. Rather than force feed the kids from one standardized test to the next, I want to suspend through the Department of Education, through the Superintendent of Public Education, I want to suspend standardized testing in the grades until we restructure our system where teachers have the flexibility to mentor, to know that even 2 children of the same age, born on the same day, develop and learn at different paces and in different ways. I want the teacher to be able to teach. I want arithmetic, algebra, language, and science to be taught at the highest level or at the highest standards, and I want our kids to have a chance to get there. 25% of Wyoming high school graduates that come to the University of Wyoming cannot do freshman math or freshman language. We're losing on the average another 20% is dropouts. We need to do something different in our system, and it's not the teachers, it's the system they're working in. We need to change that.
There was an issue that came up during this legislative session that had to do with guns in the schools here in Wyoming, including parents being able to carry guns in schools.
Second Amendment of the Constitution says that the people have the right to keep and bear arms, and it shall not be infringed. So gun-free zones are unconstitutional. All the various district, court, all the county laws that bar you from carrying a gun here or there, they're unconstitutional. So when I'm governor, we're going to work very hard so people come to understand firearms, understand they're a powerful tool for self-defense, and people should be able to carry anywhere they choose. If we had guns, and one gun in the school is Sandy Hook, and we're not having this ridiculous thing happen. One gun somewhere in a dorm at Virginia Tech, and we don't have that terrible
and that's
tragedy.
what stopped somebody in Colorado just recently in a school shooting that almost happened in Colorado, but an armed guard came around the corner and ended that real fast. So, okay, you have a meeting tonight in Gillette, Wyoming.
A meeting tonight. We'll be at the Knights of Columbus Hall in downtown Gillette for a meet and greet at 6 o'clock, and then a little bit of a introduction to me, and then we'll take questions and answers from the public. So it's open to the public. I'd invite everybody to come down and get your questions answered and get a chance to find out what I'm like.
In person. Well, where is the Knights of Columbus Hall for those people who don't? You have no idea, but you're just going to be driven there.
Yeah, I'm going to be driven there.
Okay, well, they can look up Knights of Columbus Hall in Gillette, Wyoming. They'll be able to stop by and see you there. Again, that starts at 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
Right. Now, you're on a whirlwind tour, so where do you go after here?
I go to Park County here, and then, well, actually, I go to Park County to Bighorn County, back to Park County, then back to Bighorn County, and then to the southern part of the state, then to Teton County, Uintah County, Laramie County, Natrona County.
Okay. This is going to be an interesting primary. When does that actually happen in the state of Wyoming?
Primary is in August, about the 14th.
About the 14th of August. Okay, so you have between now and then, and I would assume a lot of money to raise, because Matt Mead, deep pockets.
A lot of money to raise, but my strength is meeting the people and having and answering their questions face to face and having them look at how I got to where I am in life. Guys, I worked. Yeah. You know, I worked myself up through our wonderful free enterprise system, and I want to offer everybody the chance to do that and a chance to take advantage of what I've learned and what the Lord's done for me.
Okay, Taylor, as always, thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much, Glenn.